Hello, hello, and welcome back to the channel. Okay, you guys, it's way past due, but today we are finally, wow, I put the camera up too high. Okay, I'll fix that in a second. We're finally doing our July book update. Let me move the camera. Is that better? Yeah. So, you guys know I'm a voracious reader. I've actually been vlogging today for my Patreon channel, and so I just went over all the books, like the number of books. I read 31 books in the month of July, which does, of course, equal a book a day, which sounds like a lot, but I will say the books I read are pretty quick. They're pretty quick reads, and I read fast, and I read a lot. I don't sleep, and after about 2 hours of not getting back to sleep, I usually just give up and read. So chronic insomnia, I only sleep like 3 hours a night, like on the best of nights. So that's mostly how I manage it. Regardless, I read 31 books in the month of July. Now that I'm filming this and it's mid-August, it's like hard to remember because I've already read 20 something books in August, which yes, does equal almost 2 books a day. But also I've been very depressed in August, so that actually tracks. Okay, let's just talk about July, which is crazy because I want to talk about my August books, but that video will be just around the corner. So if you're new to the channel and you're just like, who is this voracious reader? My name is Rachel. This is Rachel Rambles. I make videos on fashion and I don't know, I'm a 30-something-year-old stay-at-home mom living in Los Angeles. I like to read. And pretty much exclusively, I like to read romance novels. And lately, I would say like this year specifically, I really only read queer romance novels, typically male, not exclusively, but mostly. I definitely went into some weird territories in July, but I think, well, we'll get there. But yeah, this is all gonna be, I think pretty much, I don't know if I read a single straight person book in July. I actually don't remember the last straight person book I read. They're so boring to me now. I much prefer queer literature. I read on my Kindle exclusively. I don't have enough room in my house to be buying books. So this is my Kindle. I need to redecorate it soon. I've been saying that for months. I just really love this little setup. But this is like when I was in my fantasy romance era last year, and I do feel like I need to update it for my more queer romance year that I'm having this year. I read some bangers and I read some losers, so let's just jump into it. Oh, I was gonna say, because I read on Kindle, most of the books that I read are indie authors that I could find on Kindle Unlimited. I feel like I found some real gems. I've also found some real stinkers. It's a hit or miss situation on Kindle Unlimited, but there's definitely a lot of queer romance literature available on Kindle Unlimited, which I like. I also sometimes get books from Libby, the library app at the local Los Angeles library. There's a lot of selection there, but typically the books I want to read on Libby are books that are a little more popular, so I read those a little more sporadically just as they're available. Let's start with, I ended July with reading Sunrise on the Reaping. I ended June with reading Sunrise on the Reaping, so I can't remember if I talked about it because I started reading it on the 30th and I finished reading it on the 3rd of July. Sunrise on the Reaping, immediately not a queer romance novel, so I guess I immediately walked that back, but I think it's the only one I didn't read. So I thought it was okay. My least favorite Hunger Games book, if I'm being honest. I thought it was way too fan servicey and that it could have been better as its own standalone if she wasn't trying to like shoehorn in all of this like referential stuff. I don't know. That being said, I still really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, then I read Stirring Spurs, which is a queer cowboy romance from M.A. Wardle. M.A. Wardle wrote the Teacher of the Year series that I really enjoyed most of, so I was just like, oh, this is an author that I like. I think I followed him on Instagram and I saw that he was coming out with book 1 of this like cowboy series written by different queer romance authors. I didn't like it. I thought it was too, like, listen, it doesn't bother me when romance novels aren't realistic because like, that's fine. I love a cheesy book as much as the next person, but this was just like too much. Like a lot of people like books like this that are kind of like low angst, slow drama, easy connection, like the romance just slides through with almost no pushback. I like a book that has a little bit more drama and angst, and for me this was just too like, there's not enough drama and angst. I think I haven't really gone back to reading cowboy stuff. I like a western or a cowboy romance as much as the next person, but I have to be like in a really specific mood to read it, as opposed to like sports romance that I can read pretty much anytime. I don't know. I just have to be in a specific mood for a western, and it wasn't hitting right. Okay, the next book I read was called Chasing Riddick by Alexandra St. Pierre. This was an interesting one. It was like well, I can't really say the trope because it gives away the twist. The twist was pretty good. I just didn't really love the writing style, so this was a 4 star. 4 star still good. 4 star better than 3 star. Then I read, and this is interesting, I read Cross the Line and Make the Play, 2 books in the Kings of Heart series by Lucky Hart. Cross the Line got 4 stars. I thought the writing was good. This was a recommendation from Kindle Unlimited, but I didn't love, like, there was an age gap that felt weird, and there was also just like because of the age gap, which I'm not always a huge age gap fan. I can do an age gap if everybody is like over the age of 25. But in this case, one of the characters was still in college and there was an age gap, which I've read a couple, and I'm like, I don't know. Also, it was a little hurt comfort, but the hurt comfort is a romance trope, but the hurt was like a little too much for me. So I thought that Cross the Line was okay. I almost didn't read the second one, Make the Play. I gave Cross the Line 4 stars. I liked the writing. I just wasn't like a huge fan of a lot of the tropes. I decided to read Make the Play anyway because I thought, well, maybe the second one will be different. And this is maybe one of my favorite books I've read this year. Make the Play, Kings of Heart, Book 2 by Lucky Hart. I actually have been thinking about rereading it lately because I loved it so much. I read so fast. So I have actually been thinking a lot about like going through a lot of my reads this year, picking out what I would consider the 6-star reads, like ones that I gave 5 stars, but I would have given 6 if possible, and rereading a bunch of them because I read so fast. Like I would like to luxuriate in some of my favorites. And if I were to do that, which is something I've been considering doing, Make the Play would 100% be a 6-star read. There's also there's a neurodivergent character, which I do like reading books that have neurodivergent characters. My husband is on the autism spectrum, and it's nice to have neurodivergent representation in romance. I don't know, it's definitely relatable for me. So I'm not neurodivergent, but my husband is, and so it's just like I enjoy it. I enjoy reading about it, and the characters were like super well written and well developed, and just gave me like a lot of good feels. Also, it has a well written trope that I feel like I'm always seeking and I rarely find, which is 2 men that become good friends, one of whom is under the assumption that they're straight, and then they realize they've fallen in love with their best friend. Now that's like a friends to lovers, which is a pretty common trope, but it's rarely written in a way that I find to be truly satisfying. The only other book that's really like nailed it for me is You and Me by Tal Bauer, another 6-star read that I would 100% reread in that universe where I reread stuff. But Make the Play also nailed that trope perfectly. So that was good. Then I read To Catch a Firefly by Emmy Sanders. This has been recommended to me multiple times. I'm glad I finally read it. Another neurodivergent character, so I think that's why I ended up giving it 5 stars. Emmy Sanders is so hit or miss for me as an author, but I did like this one a lot. I thought that this one was pretty good. Then I read a lesbian novel called On the Same Page, another friends to lovers trope. I thought the writing in this was a little repetitive. I liked the characters, but overall, like, I was hoping that this was going to be like author that wrote like women love women books that I was going to fall in love with, and ultimately I had no interest in reading more, so that's why I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then I read a shitload of books by the author Jax Calder, who has become one of my favorite queer lit authors. I think I read pretty much everything I could get my hands on now. I have read Jax Calder books in the past, and I don't know why I didn't. And I read, what was it called? The Unlikely Heir and The Unlikely Pair a couple months ago. And The Unlikely Pair, the second book in that series, another one of my 6-star reads. So I don't know why at the time I didn't just continue on and reading the rest of their series, but I didn't. But The Revenge Game, which was recommended to me, 5 stars. And then I know that soon they are publishing, and I'll get to this at the end when I go to my TBR, soon they're publishing The Unlikely Spare, which is the 3rd book in that Unlikely series. The Revenge Game is the 1st book in a series that she's also still working on, so there's only 1 book out right now. I got 5 stars. And she has a completed series called Sporting Secrets, including Playing Offside, Playing at Home, and Playing for Keeps. 5-star, 5-star, 4-star respectively. That's a rugby series. Loved it. Then they have a Rainbow Redemption series. There's 2 books, Beautiful Hearts and Reckless Hearts. 5-star, 5-star. Reckless Hearts in particular, one of my more favorites of the ones that I liked from her. Then there was a novella duology. I usually don't like to read novellas just because I do read regular books at such a high clip, like reading novellas. For me, it's like I could do it in like 30 minutes, depending on the novella. But I did read this duology because I was just like really into her writing. I read The Anonymous Hookup and The Unforgettable Hookup, which is actually the same story told from 2 different perspectives. So I kind of read it all, those 2 together, but I considered it to be like 1 novel, and I really like that. 5 stars. Okay. This is crazy. So then I read a series by Lark Taylor. Now I have since, in the month of August, I have now read every single book that Lark Taylor has ever written. But I started with the series Caffeine Daydreams, which I think is kind of interesting. It was like a random recommendation, either from Reddit or from Kindle Unlimited. White Noise, Green Light, Red Haze, 5 stars. I have become obsessed with the author Lark Taylor. I think this is the only series I read in the month of July. This is a series about like a boy band group in the UK, all finding their various loves of their lives. Lark Taylor is actually more known for writing paranormal queer romance, and all of the other books they've written are paranormal and incredible. We'll have to talk about them in my August book update. But I really liked these. I didn't know anything else about Lark Taylor, and I came into this, and it's funny because this is not really a good representation of their writing. I still really liked them. I have said this before and I'll say it again. I'm not looking for like thought-provoking, genre-defining, generation-defining writing here. I'm looking for books that make me feel happy. When I assign star ratings, it has a lot more to do with how a book makes me feel personally, subjectively, than it does with any actual book critique. I'm not a book critic. I'm not a literary person. I don't, have an English degree or anything like that. I just like to read books that make me feel a certain way. I want to feel angsty. I want to feel piney. I want to feel in love. And so if I give a book 5 stars, it means it's just hit all of those feelings for me. Whether or not it's a good book or not, I think is always a subjective opinion, but is particularly subjective in my experience when it comes to me, because I am a subjective reader, as we all are, but I don't pretend to be anything else. Okay. Then I read, this is a highly recommended book I'm in this subreddit group, what's it called? MM_romance books. So it's gay male romance books. There's a whole subreddit, there's like 60,000 members, so I'm not the only person who loves this genre. This is one of the higher recommended books from that subreddit. It's called For the Fans by Nyla K. Now, I don't know a lot about Nyla K, but I do know that I believe it's a she, has written some problematic books. This is not one of those books. This is book, I didn't feel like anything was problematic about it. But I do know that about the author, so I just wanted to say that there is some level of controversy about them. Not about this book though. This book is highly recommended and I got 5 fucking stars. I wouldn't say this is a 6-star read. I don't know if I would reread it, but I did really enjoy the experience of reading this book. It was like about a college kid who starts an OnlyFans. I will say there was like a stepbrother angle, which I actually read a couple of stepbrother books this month. Not my favorite trope. I guess, I know a step sibling trope is not uncommon in romance world, even in the straight romance world, but not my fave. That being said, I will say for the spice alone, which I don't always read these books for the smut, but I do love a smutty book, For the Fans is 5 stars. Like if you're just like, I want to read a hot ass sexy book, For the Fans by Nyla K. 100%. That I can say. That I remember. Okay. Then I read If We Could Go Back by Cara D. This is part of a larger series that I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I wanted to read books with a lot of pining. I remember like looking up in the subreddit, like books with a lot of pining. The problem I had with this book is that like overall it was enjoyable, but it was about 2 married men who had affairs with each other on their wives, and I didn't love that. I do love drama, like I said, and I do love angst, but I don't love cheating. So the book was well written and the characters were good and there was like a lot of pining, and then the happy ever after was nice, but I don't love an affair. Even if the people deserve it, I don't love an affair. So I ended up giving it 4 stars because other than that I really liked it. But because of that I was like, I don't know if I want to continue anything with this author because I don't know, it just made me feel weird. Then I wanted to read some enemies to lovers. So once again I went looking for some recommendations and I got recommended the series Hawthorne University series by Bethany Winters. So I read Like You Hate Me and Don't Say You're Sorry. I gave them 4 stars and 3 stars respectively. Like You Hate Me was definitely enemies to lovers, and by the end when because it was kind of told out of order, and when it all came together it was like very satisfying, and I remember like being addicted and being like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? I don't get that feeling a lot reading these books, so that was kind of nice. That's why I ended up getting 4 stars. But the enemies part was like, it was like more like a bully romance, which is not always my favorite. Like very like if you guys have read the Zodiac Academy, that's like a fantasy romance with a lot of bully stuff in it, and that's not always my favorite, but the story ended up saving itself at the end. Don't Say You're Sorry, another stepbrothers love story that I just thought was a little too repetitive from the first one, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. Okay, I kind of rushed through all of that because this is what I really wanted to talk about. I would say the highlight and the pinnacle of my July reading was the Monstrous series by Lily Mayne. I always said I wasn't gonna read monster love romance stuff. That's like a big part of romance reading, like genre. It's like a big subgenre of romance is to read like these monster stories, which is basically like a human and a non-human, right? And that always felt weird to me. Like even when I've read in the past, because I read a lot of paranormal stuff, like I don't have any problems with like vampires and ghosts and stuff like that, but even like I had like a kind of stop reading like werewolf stuff because even that was giving me like a little bit of the ick, and I just thought I can't read a book about a human fucking like a non-human entity. Like it just doesn't feel right. But it kept getting recommended to me on the subreddit, and people who love this series love this series. I thought, you know what, I'll read the first one or I'll start it, and I don't, I can stop reading it. Nobody's in charge of me. I can do whatever I want. It's probably my favorite series of all time. No, it's not, but it's up there. It's one of my favorite series of all time. I would reread the whole thing right now. It ended up being one of the best things I've ever read. Listen, if you're not cool with weird sex shit, don't read it. Because there's a lot of weird sex stuff in it. But if you're cool with weird sex organs, non-human sex organs, then something about the way Lily Mayne wrote this series, all of the monsters are so unbelievably likable and the love stories are so good. And I highly recommend that if you are going to read this series, you read it in order. I know that people for some reason don't, but even though they are all technically standalone novels, they like do interconnect, and I think reading them in chronological order is important to getting a greater appreciation for the overall world that she has built. I did look it up, and sadly, Lily Mayne has breast cancer and she has stopped writing this series, which is unfortunate because I think there's only supposed to be 1 or 2 more books left before it's complete. That being said, I hope obviously that she does well and she recovers. Not just so that I can read the rest of her series, but more so for her own health. But honestly, like, I will be following her and hoping that, you know, the series does eventually come to an end because I had such a wonderful time reading it. So, in order, the books are Soul Eater, Eden, I think you pronounce it The Reek, Win, which is a novella, Gloam, Moth, Seraph, and Lore, which, by the way, that's the name of all the monsters. 5 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. All of them got 5 stars. For some reason, I gave Eden 4 stars. That was my least favorite. Looking back, I feel like maybe I missed. I'm wondering why I did that. Anyway, without a doubt, my favorite was the first one, Soul Eater. With my second favorite being the 5th one, Moth. They were all really good. They're all different enough. All the monsters are different enough, but again, they all do kind of interconnect. The craziest one was Seraph. That was the one that I was having the hardest time wrapping my head around. But the human was neurodivergent, and you guys, now you know I have a soft spot for neurodivergent main characters, so that did get me. You really have to just kind of buy into the fact that you're reading about straight up monsters, but the romance is still really good. It's like this post-apocalyptic version of Earth where like a terror in between dimensions has caused monsters from a different universe to come in and sort of take over Earth, and how humans and humanity would react to that. And there's like a lot of themes of like xenophobia and like survival, and in the midst of it, all of these various humans find love with these non-human entities. And you know, it sounds crazy, but every single one of the love stories was like, I finished every story like, oh, I was sobbing at the end of the last one, Lore. Like, it had a really, I mean, every book has a happily ever after. I almost never read a book that doesn't have a happily ever after. I literally look it up in advance if the book's gonna have a happily ever after, because I don't like it when they don't. So every book does, but these books took me on a fucking emotional journey, and I would 100% reread, honestly, all of them if in a world where I'm going to start rereading some of my faves. I had a huge book hang. I read this series really fast. I was reading the series when I was down in San Diego with my parents, so I had a lot of extra time, and I read it really fast. And I had a huge book hangover when it was done. Like, I almost reread it right away. I was almost like, you know what? I just got to start it over. And I ended up not doing that. But I knew I needed like a little reprieve before I jumped into something major again. So I ended up reading Poetry on Ice and The Legend Next Door, which is a series by Jessie H. Rain. Jessie H. Rain is an interesting author. I read one of their books in the past and I didn't love it, but again, this was highly recommended. I gave both of them 4 stars. Jessie Rain writes in a very specific way that is very entertaining, very fun to read. Like, their writing style is very fun. I just thought Poetry on Ice in particular was like enemies to lovers, but it was more like 2 people that like barely know each other being super mean to each other. Enemies to lovers is such a hard line to write because it's only really satisfying if they're actually enemies, but they have to, you know, also like, I don't like a bully romance. So that was like just on the wrong end of the line for me. And then The Legend Next Door was just like, I think there was like a little bit of that was just like, and none of these books are believable in any way, but it was just a little too convenient and unbelievable to me. They both got 4 stars. I do really enjoy the entertaining way that Jessie writes, but either way, it was just like not my favorite thing. And that's everything I read in July. The highlight of July, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, was the Monstrous series. The second highlight would be Make the Play by Lucky Heart, and the third highlight would be rediscovering the writing of Jax Calder. Those are my highlights of July. I read a lot of good stuff. Some stuff that, like I've already said, I'm definitely interested in rereading. And I wrote this down somewhere. On August 22nd, The Unlikely Spare by Jax Calder comes out. And on November 13th, Break the Rule by Lucky Heart comes out. So those are continuations of series that I have read in the last month. And I'm looking forward to it. I have now, like, I've started a list of books that are coming out in series that I've started so that I make sure I get them when they come out. But yeah, it's hard to give you a TBR because since I've finished reading all of my books in July, I've read 20 something books in August, including some more amazing series and a lot in every single book that Lark Taylor has ever written. But I won't get into that because that'll be next month's book update. But yeah, I read a lot. I learned a lot. I feel like I've been talking for a long time. But yeah, if you guys are into this genre, I'd love to hear your favorites. If you guys want like a bigger breakdown of what I've read in this genre, I would say like I'm pretty staunchly staying in the queer romance space for a while longer. So most of my book updates probably the rest of the year are gonna stay in this. Just like last year was like a lot of fantasy romance, this year is definitely a lot of queer romance, and I really have no desire to read anything else. And my mom was just here, my parents were just here hanging out with me this morning, and she reads a lot of, my mom reads a lot of books too, and she reads pretty fast, but she reads some romance sometimes, but mostly she likes to like historical fiction stuff, and she's always trying, she lets me borrow her books, and she's always trying to get me read different stuff. And I just like, because I read so much like only for pleasure, I just have like very little interest in going outside of the things that I know I like. Occasionally I do, but it's just hard because I'm like, why waste my time when I know what I like to read? You know what I mean? That being said, I always take recommendations. Many of my favorite books that I read last year and this year are books that you guys recommended to me, so I'm open to anything. I will say in general, I like romance. Doesn't have to be queer. I prefer it to be. And I like smut. I like my books to have at least one little smutty scene. It isn't that, actually, like honestly, I prefer a slow burn, and if there is gonna be smut, I prefer it not to be until like the last like 30% of the book, somewhere in there. Like I love an earned sex scene. I don't love sex scenes for the sake of themselves, but I do love a smutty romance novel. I mean, like, you know, it is what it is. But that's my July book review. I had a great reading month. Listen, I may not have posted a video every single day. I may not have done that for Vlogmas in July, but I certainly read a book a day. Yeah. Also, like, I would be interested in maybe in like a month or two from now, like making a list of all of the 6-star reads. I mean like every 6-star read, not just queer romance 6-star reads, every 6-star read I've ever read, and maybe just making a video on it or doing a reread month, or I don't know, something like that. So let me know if you guys think that's a good idea. I know my book videos aren't that popular, but those of you who like them really love them, and I appreciate you so much because reading definitely become one of my biggest hobbies in the last couple of years. I would say honestly, purchasing a Kindle for myself as a gift was the thing that I mean, I was reading books, but it was hard because I was trying not to like buy so many books all the time, so I was like kind of limited in the amount I was reading. But once I got my Kindle, it was like the fucking sky was the limit, and it's just been like such an amazing fun hobby to reconnect with because I was such a voracious reader when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, and then I just lost it, you know, when I like started working a lot more, and it's been nice to like rediscover my passion for reading, even if it does take up almost all of my free time. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching. I love you oh so much, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.